Yeah, in our PowerPoint, loving culture, when people think of strategy, they often um, think of a series of slides laying out that lays out a vision, a plan, and a way forward to bring it to life. However, we both know that static documents aren't strategy. Rather, strategy exists in the minds of people doing and making and bringing the work to life. And we often use words like alignment to acknowledge that strategy is this like living document in the minds of people, and that we're actually executing things seamless together. So the more that people actually know and can repeat strategy and know what they're doing, the more that, like, yes, aligned or direction or the path forward, those are all types of things that we use to say that people are like, you know pushing things forward. um, and what we both work in very similar but different creative industries. And I think the same holds true for in-house teams, right? If a strategy is only in a deck, it will fail because as soon as you're done doing your big song and dance presentation, it just disappears, right? It's not people forget about it. And strategy is just an artifact that becomes less less valuable the further you get away from that presentation. And so strategy needs to be a living thing. And so I wanted to get some time with you to chat around different ways that, in your experience, you've seen strategy like actually, turn itself into that living thing and something that people can repeat, and something that, like, you walk into a room and people know who their customer is. They know what the story is they want to tell. They know the North Star that they're going for. And I wanted to chat about different tactical ways that you've seen, especially as external consultants and creative service people, how we can help strategy actually be that living thing. So I don't
Oh
know if any
yeah.
come to mind for you off the top of your head that you want to
Oh
chat.
yeah. I mean, it's so important, and you're so correct. I mean, the first fail point of a strategic document is that some people just might not open it. So you've got to make sure you have other ways and other opportunities for people to encounter the strategy you're building. And one thing I've heard you say multiple times before is to be the reminder in chief in the room. That, as a strategist on a team, or even as a strategist within your organization, you want to make sure you are constantly reiterating and articulating those values, that mission, even if it's in more subtle or nuanced ways. But one thing that I love about that idea of a reminder in chief that you champion is that it allows us the opportunity to keep strategy attached longer. In our capacity at Buck, especially, I always want to make sure that the strategists on the team have that chance to be involved further and further into the creative development process, because that strategic and creative handoff that you see happening in traditional agencies most of the time, it can be detrimental to not have that strategist stay attached and be a part of being that gut check and sort of even the client's ambassador in the smaller design team rooms, where they can speak up and keep those brand truths top of mind, remind the CD, remind the ADs which things are really kind of actually validating the strategic foundation we've built, and which are maybe pushing a little bit too far outside the envelope. So it's something that I know you're a big proponent of, as far as that title, reminder in chief, but it's something that's actually very, very true for our processes on the Buck side.
Yeah, totally. With the reminder in chief specifically, I like to think a lot of times about like capital S strategy and like lowercase s strategy. And oftentimes after you've like, you get an organization aligned on whatever, maybe a big creative concept or a brand system or a platform, something that like feels really foundational. But then you can also, the further away you get from that, like why you originally made those decisions can come into question or get diluted. And so I try to find as much as possible whenever you're delivering some sort of lowercase s strategy deliverable, say a brief for a single type of asset, or something else, like connecting it back up to the big picture. Like, thinking small and big at the same time is often hard for anyone,
Oh yeah.
especially organizations, especially as you're dealing with multiple people. And so being able to be like, here is, we're about to walk through this, but reminding you why we're looking at this today, because yeah, people are showing up to a creative review or approval meeting or something else, and they have been doing 1,000 other things, and they're not thinking day in and day out around oftentimes what an external team is. Like, you may be thinking about the strategy all the time for whatever work you're doing, but they're thinking about a business strategy or how do I get something done, or even like what's going on in my personal life. And so we have to kind of ground ourselves, and strategy is a big piece of that. If you are the effective reminder in chief, to do that for sure. Another one that I like to think of as just making things sticky. And by being sticky,
Yes.
it's mnemonic devices or rule of thumbs or anything that makes it easy to repeat the strategy, like using all the same letter at the beginning of a word, like anything that can make it something that you can just casually say. Because if you don't actually say it and you can't acknowledge it, it can kind of disappear. I often find as well that happens with, is the strategy an external facing thing or an internal facing thing in terms of like a core idea or message? Sometimes we blur those lines together, and it makes it hard for someone to know, oh, wait, is that our tagline? Is it not? And so, as much as possible, taking the same thing for internal strategies and making sure that they are as thoughtful as external ones as well, because it can very easily turn into that where, again, if I can't actually remember the strategy, it's very hard for me to lift the strategy too.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny thinking back. I love alliteration. I think strategy as a practice loves alliteration, right? We have the 4 C's, and then at Buck we have this 5 or 6 phase process of like the different D's, deploy, all of these different things that we use as those mnemonic devices, like you're talking about, so that it's just that much easier for us to recall and sort of build that muscle around retaining the information that we're given. So any and every time I can, even if it's in like the smaller nuances of the strategic process, whether it's naming individual creative concepts that we're bringing to the table, finding small opportunities to inject things like alliteration, just make it that much stickier and easier for people to kind of glob onto when you're actually hashing those things out with client in the iterative feedback rounds that we have. So I'm a huge proponent of alliteration, always will. Also puns, like even things like that can help to just make strategic frameworks that much easier to recall. And at this day and age, when we are inundated with so much information all the time, making what you're putting forward to client that much easier to recall can be the difference between success and failure of a concept sometimes. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, because it also, going back to the reminder in chief, it makes it like, if you can remember it, you have less work to do on the reminding side. So they definitely are like two peas in a pod there. So another piece is making sure that every communication basically has the strategy associated with it. We talked a little bit about this with being the reminder in chief and attaching a brief and reminding everyone what the strategy is, but it doesn't have to happen just in core deliverables. We're talking about moments like emails or text messages with a client, Slack messages, documents that aren't like formal decks. These are all moments that oftentimes strategists or people working in strategy forget. They think it's, oh, this isn't the work, this is something else, this isn't strategic. We think of, again, strategic as this big thing that happens once, where strategy is really happening all the time, and it's important to either course correct or justify decisions, bring a POV, and so that can happen at every moment of communication. So when in doubt, when you're about to send something, be like, is this a moment to connect back to the big picture? Is this a moment that I can reinforce why we're here, what we're doing, and where we're going? Because even if it's just a little extra sentence on the end, and you don't have to overdo it and like restate the strategy every time, but it's a way to make sure that you are justifying the deliverable, justifying the recommendation, because oftentimes, what you want to do is just ground things in insights, regardless of whatever the thing is, because otherwise it's just like, yeah, do this or do that, but you're not necessarily connecting it to the work that has to be done.
Totally. And I think that note of reinforcement that you mentioned is what's so critical there. It's building that muscle. It's making sure that we hear, understand, adopt that language, and use that as our shared vernacular when we are on that particular brand, that particular project. What is it in politics? Like, if you want somebody to remember something, you have to say it 3 times in a speech or something like that. It's that idea of that repetition that really helps people to solidify in their mind what it is that we're all jumping off from when we have that strategic foundation. So I do appreciate using every interaction as that opportunity for reiteration to a point. And then there's that point where you make sure you're like injecting the right words, but not necessarily copy pasting, making it an organic part of the conversation so that it becomes something people are comfortable speaking to and comfortable working into their own answers. And it just also, when that communication is directly with client, it gives them that language and that comfort and ease of use to then use that language when they are speaking to the higher ups on their side to sell that same kind of concept through. So by using that language and that strategic vernacular within our exchanges, we can kind of equip each other together to be that much better prepared and knowledgeable about what we're speaking to through any phase of the process, whether we're selling it in or whether we're at the tail end and we're teaching the internal team to adopt the tools and processes we've made. We have that shared understanding and that shared comfort and ease talking about it together that makes it that much smoother sailing at the outset.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's also to your point of the point of like not copying pasting. It's again, strategy is a living thing. As soon as whatever that original core statement was is put out into the world or changed, like the world has changed, culture's changed, the client's changed, a new product's launched, and so potentially the core truths are the same, and so not being too rigid, but treating it as a moment to there may be a new direction coming up as well. And I think we often in our worlds think of say on the campaign side of things, like we had a campaign and then there's a new campaign coming up next year or something like that. But no, it's an evolution to get there. And the more that we're thinking of this as a continual state of learning and the strategy evolving means that insights are feeding into that next process and the strategy can evolve, and a brand isn't this like continual thing that has hard stops and beginnings. They exist in the minds of the consumers in the same way, and that's how it exists in an organization as well. And so sometimes we put artificial structures around stuff because it's how our scopes are, or how an organization needs formal approvals or things like that. But every moment is a moment to share that evolution of strategy, not just strategy, but evolution of it too. So.
Oh, totally. And that actually leads kind of perfectly into another of the ways that we kind of approach and make strategy. The idea of talking it out, workshopping it, recognizing that that is part of the process that makes strategy successful. In that, like we like to say, I think this was something that we originally heard from Elizabeth at the Nucleus Group, but meeting people in the messy middle. Like we, at least at Buck, and I know you all do because we collaborate so closely together with Part and Sum, we meet our partners, our clients in the messy middle and invite them into the process of workshopping and actually aligning around those basic building blocks of strategy, where I know some agencies will like go away, like you were mentioning, reveal the strategy at the end, but we like to actually invite partners in, workshop, and talk through what words are working, what words aren't, and kind of finesse and wordsmith those basic building block foundations together, because we've seen on our side that really enhances the sense of ownership and the ways in which clients adopt that strategy and really live and breathe and evolve it from there together, because they saw how we got there. They were in the trenches with us. They workshopped those pain points with us. So we, in that way, by inviting people into that sort of messy part of it, there isn't necessarily that need to then justify why we landed at this is your brand positioning statement, this is your brand promise. They saw for themselves how they got there, and they were part of the molding and part of the making. So it just makes it that much easier to believe in and adopt and employ a strategy when you were a part of actually structuring down to the words together with us. And I love that kind of messy middle. I know that can sometimes be a little bit difficult when things like workshops or daily drops or biweekly check-ins, sometimes that cadence can become overbearing for some, but we absolutely kind of thrive on that and being truly in the trenches with our partners. And I know that you've been in the trenches with us, so you definitely are there for it. I don't know if it's something that
yeah. Well, and I think to your I think another way of framing that and thinking about it is, if you think of the end deck or deliverable or the document, the artifact, that is the output of strategy, and it's the documentation of strategy, not the creation of it, and not the strategy itself of getting the alignment, getting the ownership, getting the path forward, creating the insights. Like, all those things are a way of documenting and laying it out. But, again, I agree with you, not every client, not every project, there's different levels of collaboration and different levels, and being flexible around, what is the right way to incorporate ownership from across the team, and being open to having pure co-creation of that strategy that happens in that process and that messiness, versus also, teams that are looking for more feedback on it too. Like, I often think of it as like Mad Libs, the creation of strategy, where our process oftentimes is create the structure and the framework, and then to have help the client who knows their business extremely well to add their pieces into it, and for us to push it together. But again, it depends how many blanks are in there, right, and how much to create that living thing together. Because again, the strategy is only as effective as an organization accepts it and aligns to it. And so it can be the world's best strategy in a document, but if it doesn't have the real connective tissue with an organization, then it's not going to go anywhere.
Exactly. It's only as effective as people are willing to affect it. So I couldn't agree more. And that's why, even though we have these different frameworks, we don't always employ the same ones, right? You kind of get a sense and a feel for your client and what's going to work the best for them. So whether we're putting it in, brand on a page, a single brand ladder, and that's what we wind up handing off, or we've gone so far as to actually do video recordings of tutorials for how to adopt different brand strategy for some of our clients. There's different ways and different routes that you can find to ensure that you're creating that ease of adoption, ease of use, and ease of implementation. But that is not the same answer for every client. Every client has different frameworks, different processes that they use. So
yeah, totally.
It's always fun finding out.
Being as strategic about the approach to creation as the end document. In fact, I think there's more creativity and more strategic emphasis on how the strategy sausage is made than what's in an end document. At the end of the day, you've got core components that need to be in there: a vision for the future, a clear answer solution, something sticky, and then a roadmap to get there, and insights and all those things peppered throughout. But it's like, at the end of the day, whether or not a group wants to do that is the harder piece, right? And one of the last pieces that, when we think about strategy being manifested and more sticky inside organizations, is this idea of no surprises. Like you had said earlier, around this idea of the big reveal. There is a place for that. There is a way. Strategy is in some ways theater. In a lot of contexts of bringing people along and creating this momentum and value for a story, right? Whether it's a story internally, whether it's a story of rallying a group around it, whether it's a story for customers. But it can be, having a surprise can go too many different directions, and sometimes can be high risk, both for an organization and also for creating that sense of ownership and buy-in. So the fact of revealing and bringing people along for the development of strategy, showing things as work in progress, getting feedback on them, inviting people to put ideas and feedback and fingerprints all over the document, the strategy itself that becomes that end document, is part of the process. And the more that we, surprises totally are a useful rhetorical device. It's just when and where we use them is often something we have to be pretty deliberate about when we do the work.
Yeah, and I think the no surprises is such a great point. in a nuanced way, in that it shouldn't shock. Like, a strategy for a brand that is existing should not shock the brand stakeholders. They know their brand better than we do. It shouldn't just come out of left field and not make any good sense for that particular brand. But it doesn't mean it can't have that aha moment, which is, I guess, in and of itself a mild surprise, but I wouldn't call it a surprise. So to me, the no surprises still holds true. You can have that aha moment, but it would still make perfect sense for the brand and still conforms to the foundation and the legacy that they have. It's just maybe looking at it from a slightly different perspective, or bringing their occurring brand foundation to life in a different visual expression that might in and of itself be a little bit surprising, but it's not necessarily a surprise that that brand would ever do that. So
Totally. I don't also
I
think the
agree.
best ideas and the best strategies are obvious, but they're like beautifully obvious. They're like
Yes.
a way that like, oh, this is the only thing we could have done. But to get there, often if you are holding things back and not having a dialogue and holding it to that surprise moment rather than building to that beautiful obviousness, there's something like, oh yeah, of course this is the thing we should do. That is the way of creating strategy, because you're creating it through all those touch points, through all that lack of surprise, even if the end reveal is a very aha, or how it's actually manifested. And oftentimes it's not necessarily the strategy that's the aha, it's maybe the creative manifestation of it, or other pieces that really like evoke that strategy in like a compelling way too.
Exactly. I think the way you phrased it, beautifully obvious, is absolutely perfect. And that's really sort of the place that we like to come in, and the role we like to serve, right? We come in, we take a look at what our clients are doing. They know their brand, they know it inside and out. We get to know it with them, but because we are serving a role coming in from without, we see it in an inherently different way. And so to us, even though the answer might be so obvious and we present it back and it's beautifully obvious to them, the clients might not have seen it because they've just been too close and lived and breathed that brand for too long to not see that external perspective. And so a lot of what we do is just come in and kind of turn a mirror on them and show them, like, this is what you should do and this is why. The pieces are all here. We're just making sure you see it from the outside perspective. So I think that that's a really key role that we inhabit day to day, is to be that reflection and show a brand what they really are, the perception that they actually have from the outside, and then how we can craft that to be closer to where they want to go in the future. So I think the only other thing that I like to cultivate within our team is to not be too precious. And it goes back a little bit to more of what you were saying with the idea of, every piece of communication is a moment to evolve the strategy. Every, like, workshopping things, not sticking too concretely to what's there, but recognizing that brands evolve, brands are living things, and strategy is a living thing as well. So when it comes to the strategic foundations and structures that we're building, I always encourage my team to not be too precious. The thing that, like, really sings might be an offhand comment in the room from the copywriter, from a junior designer who's coming in fresh. Like, something new can come in and just completely change the way that we view a particular promise or positioning statement or phrase. So inviting more people, more eyes, more voices. The strategy doesn't necessarily have to be 100% locked before the engagement is over. We can allow that statement to be something that we encourage to be living and evolving even beyond what we do.
Yeah, I often tell my strategists that, again, this goes back to somewhat to the reminder in chief of like, tell me what you're going to tell me, and then tell me what you told me. But that could happen. That doesn't happen to happen when the strategy is fully baked either, right? We need to do those moments, and then you have to be careful because you don't want to say that this is the strategy. You want to find the ways to frame it that this is a teaser, or this is an insight. Do you agree with this? Do you like showing that work and finding the right methods to show work in progress with the client or the internal team's culture is really important, because you're right. It can be a full spectrum of, what fidelity people are expecting to see something. But if you are too nervous or you're trying to be to perfect, you might never actually get there.
Exactly.
And so it's better to, early and often like demonstrate that.